Good afternoon. Welcome to today's webinar brought to you by Anchore. The topic today is introducing Anchore SBOM. A couple of quick things before we jump into the meat of the subject today. All participant lines are muted. There is a chat box where you can drop your questions. We will have a formal Q&A section at the end of the session today. And then after today, you will receive an email with a recording and the slides and all that good stuff in case you want to share it with any of your colleagues or watch it again. With that, I will introduce to you today's host. It's Alex Rybeck. Hey, Alex, how are you?
Good. How are you doing, Brandon?
Good. I'm just going to run through a quick bio so everyone knows who you are and where you're coming from. So Alex is the Director of Product Management at Anchore, and he leads innovation and software supply chain security here. Previously, he was at Revenera for 18 years, and when he was there, he helped shape the vision and strategy for software composition analysis products. So Alex, you going to tell folks about the new Anchore SBOM today?
Thank you, Brandy. Thank you to everybody who's joining us. And this is exciting. It's my first product launch at Anchore. I've only been here a few months, so really excited about this one. So we're going to do this in 4 parts. So first, I will give a brief overview of the company for those who may not be aware of what Anchore does. We'll talk a little bit about kind of why we did this, right? Why SBOMs are important and what's driving their adoption. And then we'll get into what the new capabilities are that we launched back on May 29th. And I will do a product demo to show you the new features. And please post any questions in the chat and we will get to them at the end. So let's start with a little bit about the company. So Anchore was founded about a decade ago by a set of executives who had a background in open source software and really wanted to address the challenge of cloud native security. At that time, about a decade ago, containers were beginning to gain lots of adoption, and there was a big challenge for the industry on how to scale to the number of containers deployed and how to address cloud native security. The one thing that makes Anchore fairly unique is that we are the sponsors of 2 very popular open source projects, Syft and Gripe. So think of Syft as an SBOM generator, and then Gripe consumes the generated SBOM and provides you with a set of vulnerabilities for the packages making up the SBOM. Combined, they've got over 30 million downloads, so there's a lot of adoptions, lots of use out in the industry. But more importantly, we have lots of collaborators that are contributing improvements to both of those projects, making, in turn, Anchore a better application, able to find more and report more vulnerabilities. The other thing that's interesting is we basically sell to 2 sets of constituencies. So Anchore Enterprise is our flagship commercial product, and it's used in scale by both Fortune 500 enterprises, so lots of commercial customers, but also widely used in the US government, and particularly in the defense sector where it's part of their reference architecture for DevSecOps. So what that really means is that we're really good at container discovery and we're really good at deploying in a secured manner. We do support air-gapped deployments where access to internet is not available. And the scale is important because when you're looking at runtime environments and deployments, there's going to be tens of thousands, if not more, containers running at any given point. So it's important to be able to scale to that level. So Anchore is somewhat unique in how we approach SCA in that everything is really powered by SBOMs. And it's a bit of a nuance, but I do want to spend a moment on that. So typically what you see from a lot of SCA tools is an SBOM is an output, right? It's a report that you generate or it's a view that you produce at the end. At Anchore, it's a little bit different. So the SBOM is at the heart of the system. And an SBOM is a persisted immutable document that is stored in the system and used for all future functionality. And I'll get back to that point when I get into the details of how the product works. But I do want to start with talking about the use cases that we support. So the first one is container vulnerability management, and we continue to offer the best-in-class container vulnerability management solution that enables scanning tens of thousands of containers per day, whether it be as part of a CI/CD process or by monitoring a runtime environment, obtaining an inventory from a plugin that we have to understand which containers have been deployed, and then continuously scanning those to report on any new vulnerabilities or any other compliance issues. We've also been working for many years with the US federal government, particularly as part of Platform One division, and offer solutions that allow you to ensure that your software meets both NIST and DoD standards, and to achieve continuous ATO or authority to operate status, meaning that if you have to certify that you have done all the proper procedures and have safeguarded your products, we are able to produce output that will comply with those regulations. On the flip side, when we talk about enterprises, for organizations that sell to the US government, we can support FedRAMP accreditation and enable you to meet other government standards, and we'll talk about what those are a little bit further. And then finally, kind of why we're here today is our SBOM management capabilities. So there's lots of new regulations, and we'll talk about what those are. And a lot of them ultimately are requiring SBOMs as a way to identify what is being used across the enterprise to be able to drive security functionality. And we offer SBOM management capabilities within the product, regardless of whether the SBOMs are generated by us or brought in from other systems. And we'll get into more details throughout this webinar. So before we get to the product, let's talk a little bit about SBOMs and why they matter. So as most people know, modern software is complex. It's often built by distributed teams, and it is usually built on a foundation of open source and third-party components. So the key is to stay secure and compliant, right? And to be able to do so continuously, you need to understand what is inside your application at every stage of your lifecycle, from code all the way to deployment in the cloud. So this is where SBOMs come in. SBOMs are a machine-readable inventory that captures the full composition of your products by listing every package and dependencies that they include. But this is not a new concept, right? This concept of a bill of materials has been around in decades. On the hardware side, there's been enterprise resource planning systems or ERP systems that deal with inventory management, and they are driven by this idea of understanding every nut and bolt in every product, and if something goes wrong, being able to unwind that, understand which supplier produced it, look at the quality metrics that they had to comply to, and make sure that this issue doesn't occur in the future. So SBOMs essentially are an approach to try to bring what's worked in hardware into the software domain. They mainly provide transparency into the ingredients of software. They assist with assessment, and ultimately they are key to being able to do any sort of remediation planning and perform remediation, because you need to know what you have to understand if there are issues with your set of packages inside your applications. In recent years, there's been a lot of adoption of SBOMs, and really that is because they're driven by lots of different regulations around the world. And if you have any other desire to get more information, there's a link here to the CISA website. They've got lots of great resources available to talk about SBOMs, regulations, minimum formats, different industry standards, and so forth. So I did want to spend a few minutes here and really explain why SBOMs are important. If you look at regulations around the world, and here we've just got some examples for US and Europe, but there's lots of other regulations in India, in the Asia Pacific region, worldwide. There's lots of regulatory bodies, whether they're government or specific industry verticals. But ultimately, everybody's trying to wrap their head around, how do we make products more secure? How do we make them secure as they're being built? How do we monitor them once they've been released to the field and customers have deployed them? And what do we do if something goes wrong? So if you look at some of the regulations, we've got the Cyber Executive Order in the US that was created a few years back. That is kind of the overarching document that laid out a vision of all the different things that we would like to do to make software more secure as used by the US government. There's SSDF regulations around processes and how to build secure software. Pretty much every regulated industry has language around security, around quality standards, and around the ability to react if something goes wrong. And if your company is applying towards any sort of ISO certifications like 27001 or others, there's typically an audit requirement in the future that really can't be fulfilled unless you keep your inventory or your bill of material up to date. On the European side, we have similar requirements around the EU Cyber Resilience Act, which again is kind of an overarching requirement set for anything, any sort of software with digital elements. There's networking requirements, there's requirements around financial sector, around payment card industry. So again, lots of different places where there's any sort of impact to either human health or finance or companies that would be severely impacted by any security issues. And all of these regulations ultimately touch upon SBOMs. Now, the important thing to understand is if you take them all and kind of distill them down to what they're all requiring, it's typically 4 things. So they require supply chain transparency and security, meaning my customers need to have visibility into what is in my product. And for me to be able to provide that, I need to have visibility into everything that comes into my organization. So the way that that is addressed is by sharing SBOMs and VEX at scale continuously for any time that your software changes or any time you come to know of a security posture change. The second thing is asset management. So understanding how the various SBOM parts relate to each other. So are there direct dependencies? Are there transitive dependencies? So if there is a problem, where do you need to go to address it? The third is vulnerability management. And this is simply given a list of parts inside my product, what is the set of vulnerabilities associated with each one? Hopefully from multiple sources so that you can kind of coordinate on different data points and get the best explanation of the security issue. And so that you know which ones to assess and which ones you need to fix that actually impact your application. And then the fourth one is what do you do when something goes wrong? So incident response and recovery. So can you perform impact analysis? Can you plan remediation? Do you know the impact of changing an upstream package to your application or to its transitive dependencies? And having confidence that you're not going to break your product by making a change to a vulnerable package that you rely on. The fifth thing, which is an emerging requirement, is due to geopolitical concerns. So understanding who it is that has contributed code into your code stream, which ultimately is difficult to do because you have to understand who is working on which open source package that you are pulling into your commercial applications. So there's new requirements around foreign ownership, control, and influence, and SBOMs are the perfect place where, with additional annotations, you're able to express that information if it is available to you. Okay, so now that we've talked about a little bit about the company, why SBOMs are important, I do want to talk about our product, Anchore Enterprise, and explain how it works. So as I mentioned, our product is very much SBOM centric. So what that means is if you look at the left side of the diagram, there's multiple ways that SBOMs are produced and content is consumed into our product. So first, you can integrate Anchore with your CI/CD pipelines. So as you are doing builds, as you're working on your build and deployment process, your container images that are constructed out of your builds can be analyzed by Anchore. And for every analysis invocation, there is an immutable SBOM document that is persisted in the system. Meaning that if I come back 6 months later, I can always go back to an older SBOM to understand how it changed, if there's been any SBOM drift, if there's been any changes to security information. So that information is persistent in the system, it's native to the data model, and it is used for all downstream functionality. Now, Anchore can also pull content from registries. So if you are not integrating with a build, but you just want to analyze container images that are coming from Docker or JFrog or other Harbor or other registries, you can just enter registry information and you can scan that registry either by tag or all releases going back a certain period of time. And then the third way is monitoring runtime. So we have runtime plugins that are very lightweight, and all they do is report back the inventory of all running containers, and that is passed to Anchore, and then all of those container images are scanned, and we're able to not just see what is inside the image, but where that image is currently deployed. So if there needs to be any sort of mitigation or immediate remediation work, we can tell people where those vulnerable images have been deployed, and they know which systems need to either get shut down or maybe something needs to change configuration-wise. So those are the three main ways. The reason we're here today is because we've now introduced a fourth, which is being able to import external SBOMs. And external SBOMs either represent SBOMs constructed by other tools, because there's lots of tools out there and lots of companies use multiple tools. But also if you receive a bill of material from an upstream supplier, being able to pull that into your Anchore Enterprise instance and have the data sit beside any of your scanning and analysis capabilities in the product. So you have complete unified information, both from an SBOM as well as compliance perspective. So that is the Anchore SBOM part, right? That is the part that allows you to validate SBOMs as they're imported into the system. being able to download them, being able to view their contents and their security information. Once we have the SBOM, whether we constructed it or imported it, Anchor Secure is responsible for providing security information based on the packages inside the SBOM. So this includes a list of vulnerabilities from multiple data sources. It includes malware detection, includes secrets that may have been left exposed in the configuration files, and various advisories, GitHub advisories, Red Hat, and so forth. So SBOM produces the content, Anchor Secure reports on the vulnerabilities. The third module is Anchor Enforce, and that is our compliance module. And it allows users to apply out-of-the-box policy packs that are pre-configured for various controls in industry standards. So things like FedRAMP, this and NIST. But also it allows you to create custom packs based on your best practices in your organization or your downstream customer requirements. So it's a very flexible infrastructure that essentially allows you to gate the quality of the results based on any information that Anchor produces and use it as part of your CI/CD process to fail your pipeline, fail your build, or reach out to people through either email notifications or posts to collaboration tools like Slack or Teams or other tools where your engineering teams may be working. We also have a way to export various reports and trends, and reports can be scheduled or they can be run ad hoc. And there's various views that act as proof to compliance from regulations to ensure that you are FedRAMP compliant or NIST compliant based on the work that is done in the product. Okay, let's zoom in to the Anchor SBOM portion because that is why we're here today. So what we're introducing as part of Anchor SBOM is, number one, an extension to Anchor Enterprise that allows you to ingest external SBOMs, again, either representing other tools or imported based on what's supplied to you by your upstream software vendors. So we call that Bring Your Own SBOM. We can import in both CycloneDX and SPDX formats, as well as our native Syft JSON format. Having this information in the product allows you to comply with SSDF or NIST 800-218, which is essentially procedural requirements to help prepare your organization to be able to protect your software, to produce well-secured software, and to respond to vulnerabilities as they're reported to understand where they impact your applications. We also have a verification cycle on any imported SBOMs to ensure that they are NTIA compliant, that they reach the minimum requirements. And if anything is missing, we will show you that, and we'll see that in the demo as an indication that the quality may not be as high as you want, and maybe you reach back out to your vendor to get a better quality SBOM. We allow you to organize SBOMs in groups, which represent either projects or your organizational structure. And we allow you to annotate SBOMs with additional metadata. So maybe you want to add vendor information, lifecycle information, where you got it, what tool produced it. So that information is available in the SBOM, but not always filled in. So you have a way to edit it and annotate it further. And then as SBOMs are imported into the system, we do a vulnerability scan of the SBOM packages and report to you the same level of quality of data as if we had scanned the original materials to produce the SBOM ourselves. Okay, so let's now flip to the product and take a look at how this works. So I am now logged into Anchor Enterprise, and we're starting here on our dashboard page. And for those of you who are familiar with the product, you will now see a new option in the left navigation called Imported SBOMs. So if you click on this page, you see a two-panel view. On the left here, you see groups, right? And groups are arbitrary. You can create as many as you want. And groups will represent your organizational structure. They are designed to organize a set of SBOMs that represent a particular context, right? So it could be, front and back end of an application. It could be that you receive multiple SBOMs for multiple modules from different vendors, and you're trying to piece it all together. Groups allows you to put everything together. On the right, you see a running list of all imported SBOMs. So we'll show you what the SBOM is, whether it's placed in a group, what format it was in, what revision it was on, right? And this is important because if you continuously receive updated SBOMs from your vendors or other tools, we will keep a revision history of those documents. So we will be able to show you changes over time, show you how the SBOM is drifting, what parts are changing, and allow you to understand what is happening with SBOM. Is the quality getting better or worse over time? And then we'll tell you how old this SBOM is. So let's start by importing a new SBOM. So I'm going to go ahead and select, oops, I'm sorry. I'm going to select this SBOM called Drop Wizard. I will give it a name. I can give it a version, right? And then if I want to here, for example, I can provide an annotation. So I added an annotation that vendor is called Drop Wizard. And now we're going to upload and save this SBOM. So you can see, number one, it's in the system, right? It's pretty quick upload. Number two, it is currently unassigned, which means it has not been put into any context. So it's just kind of a free floating SBOM. If we go inside, we're presented with a 3-panel view. So the first thing we do is, as I mentioned, when you import an SBOM, we do a quality check. So we are looking for things like, is it a valid industry format? So is it either SPDX, CycloneDX, or Syft format? Is it a valid schema, right? Is it in proper XML, JSON, tag value format? Whatever formats we support, does it comply with that? The next thing we look at is, well, does it have content? And is the content complete? Are there artifacts documented? Does it have relationships between parts? Does it have an author? In this case, there is no author documented. Does it have a supplier? Does it have a timestamp? So we're looking at all the NTIA minimum elements to ensure that we have the highest quality possible to be able to do the downstream work. We then provide you some information about the SBOM itself, so any groups it's part of, annotations, and then we store it with an ID inside the system. And on the right, we are giving you information about the document itself. So what is the format, the size, the schema, just so you understand what it is that was brought into the system. If we go to the contents view gives you all of the packages with the versions and licenses that comprise your SBOM. Here you can see there's 168 SBOM elements, so there's going to be 168 packages explained. And then finally, we give you the vulnerability view. And the vulnerability view, there's a couple different views. So this one here is an abstracted view of the top 100 vulnerabilities. And what you will see here is that this view here abstracts vulnerabilities from within multiple packages and potentially multiple SBOMs. So what that means is this gives you a canonical list of all vulnerabilities with a unique combination of CVE and advisory. So if this is coming from National Vulnerability Database, it'll have a CVE number. If it also is mentioned in an advisory, it'll have an advisory ID. There may be one, there may be both. In either case, you will have at least one canonical identifier. You can click on any of those to click through into those original data sources. We also give you the severity of the vulnerability and the vulnerability score along with its age. So the last found is when is the first time we saw this vulnerability in the context that you're currently in. So over time, if we fast forward a month from now or so, I can track the age of vulnerabilities for this particular context and understand what's new today, this week, last month, and so forth. The other thing that you will see here is we got some filters, right? So I can filter by severity. For example, if I just wanted to see my criticals, if I wanted to filter by score, we got a slider here so you could set your minimum score and filter by that. And then most importantly here, we have this column called Anchore Rank. And Anchore Rank is our sequence that we produce to imply the order in which you should look at these vulnerabilities. And Anchore Rank is based on Anchore Score, which is a composite risk index based on the score and severity of the vulnerability. So we will take the highest score and severity from any of the contributing authorities for a particular vulnerability. We add in a factor for EPSS percentile, which is compared to the other vulnerabilities in the set, how likely is this to be exploited? And we add CISA's known exploit vulnerability status on whether there's actually a known exploit out there in the wild for this particular vulnerability. Then we put all those factors together, we weigh them, and you end up with an Anchore score, sort descending, and we give you a rank. So basically a counter on look at number 1, then look at number 2, then look at number 3. Now, what you see here is what this results in is it is likely that you will have vulnerabilities with lower severity, but higher impact because they are either more exploitable or have already been exploited, right? So that's why you can see that if you score by sort by CVSS score, you're going to have a different order than if you sort by Anchore rank, right? Now, if you wanted to get all this additional information, we allow you to export to a CSV. So as we export to this format, you could see that we give you a lot more information. And we will give you all information about every single vulnerability, but then we also start aligning vulnerabilities with the packages that are actually exploited, right? So you not only see the vulnerability, but you get the advisor information, you get the package information, and you understand here the package and version. Now, the case that I was mentioning for the Anchor rank is if you look at these two vulnerabilities, you could see that they're ranked 1 and 2. They have very different Anchor scores, which is what gives them the ranking. And you can see here that an item that has a lower severity is actually ranked higher because if you look at its KEV status, you can see one is on the KEV list, the other one is not. All right, so we're taking additional information about exploitability and factoring that into whether something is more important than something else rather than just relying on the raw score. Okay, so that's a look at an individual SBOM. Now, if you are to group SBOMs, so I've got a group created here already, which has 2 SBOMs, right? I've got a backend SBOM and a front-end SBOM. And if I go into a group view, there's a couple things that we're doing to roll this data together. So the first thing is we're taking all the SBOMs and averaging the quality. So you can understand as a set, here is my average quality across all the constituent SBOMs. And then the other thing we do is we aggregate all the vulnerability information. So you can see here, if I go, for example, to last 24 hours, there's nothing new to look at. If I go back to the last week, you can see that we've got a handful of vulnerabilities that came in during the past week. And I can go to see everything, and you'll see there is going to be a bigger set of vulnerabilities. So again, same exact view we had in a single context, but now we're mixing multiple SBOMs together and giving you a single unified list of all impacted vulnerabilities based on the packages that were in that SBOM. So this is the capabilities that we're offering in this initial release. There's a lot more planned, but the key kind of takeaways are that you can import from multiple formats, get everything and group it together, and then get unified security view with an ordered list based on several factors so that you can address them in a prioritized order. Okay, let's now open it up and see if we have any questions.
Hey, Alex. Yeah, a lot of good content there. I like all the material we ran through. Let me see here. So as we wait and give folks a chance to submit their questions in the chat box, we do have a couple that were submitted via email.
Sure.
Okay, the first one, how does this support incident response when a new critical CVE is discovered?
Sure. So let me actually go back here to the product diagram. So when a new vulnerability comes in, and this is actually why there's a lot of value in us storing the SBOMs in perpetuity. So we have a bill of material, so we know all the packages in a given application at a given point in time. So we have full history of how the composition is changing. Let's say there's a new vulnerability reported for package X. So the first thing we can do is we can run reports to understand, well, show me everywhere that package X is included. So show me all my images, show me any runtime impact, show me any registries that contain that image, show me any of my source repos or builds that contain that image. So that's the first part, right? Is understanding what's your potential impact within your application. You can also set up policies where there will be automatic notifications. So if we're talking about over here and the reporting, you can have an email go out to somebody. You can have a JIRA create automatically because there's a new vulnerability assigned to the developer for that team. And you can also get alerts in the product itself on the dashboards that tell you that there's a new problem. And at that point, it's as if you're looking at a new vulnerability. You do your assessment, you determine relative priority, and then you schedule remediation work to address it if it's a true positive.
Fantastic. I'm going to thank you to Michael, who pointed out that there are a number of questions in the Q&A box here. So let's see. The first one was, oh, will the video and slides be made available to attendees? And the answer is yes. Those will be sent out via email, likely later today, at the latest on Monday.
Mm-hmm.
Next one says, does the Anchor Enterprise Solution support non-containerized development?
Yes, so good question. So yes, although kind of our core competence comes from container world, we do support scanning source repositories through registries or through a CI or CD integration with what's called Anchor CTL, which is a command line tool you can embed into your build infrastructure. And then also by being able to ingest SBOMs if there are other tools being used to scan other environments, or again, provided outside the company, we can pull them in. And then those SBOMs are used downstream for both secure and enforced modules.
Fantastic. Another question from Michael. He says, will the product eventually graph the dependencies so you don't have to rely on tabular data format?
Yes, absolutely. We literally were just talking about this morning, so it is on the roadmap. The plan is to give you views both starting with a vulnerability to where that vulnerability has been impacting you. So vulnerability to packages, to SBOMs, to images, and so forth, but also the inverse view, which is for an application, give me a tree essentially of all my dependencies so you can understand both your direct and transitive and understand what are the code paths or the relationships through which a vulnerability may be impacted your system, and in turn, where do you have to go to remediate. So that is planned for 26.
Perfect. Let's see, Michael then asks, does this replace the current tool setup of Syft and Gripe, or is this in addition to those tools?
So it is in addition to the tools. I guess that's a good point. We should probably talk about it a little bit. So how Syft and Gripe correlate to Anchor Enterprise. So if you look at Anchor Enterprise, so the Anchor Secure is essentially using Syft with additional functionality. And then Anchor Secure, on top of producing the SBOM to return you the vulnerability information, is internally using Gripe with additional functionality. So think of Anchor Enterprise as including Syft and Gripe, adding more capabilities to those two features, and adding persistence, dashboards, policies, memory, storing information, giving you trends. So all of the enterprisey features that allow you to do more than a single assessment that results in a document, and keeping it persisted and keeping policies and dashboards and reports and so forth available for the data that is produced by Syft and Gripe. So that's the biggest difference. So if you're a developer looking to do kind of a quick smoke test on a particular directory, for example, you can use Syft to do the scan. You can then pass that over to Gripe to get your vulnerabilities. If you're an enterprise doing this across products, Anchor Enterprise gives you the features to be able to run this at enterprise scale with persistence and memory and reports and so forth.
Okay, yeah, and in real time, Michael came back and asked, how do you add metadata to the SBOM? For example, using the custom properties in the standards.
Sure. Yes. Good question. So again, this is the first release. So for now, what we're allowing you to do is essentially annotate the document. So that those were the vendor string that I put in. The plan is over time to allow you to actually edit the SBOM. Now, editing kind of falls into two phases. If the SBOM is produced by Anchor, right, then you have full control over the parts because it's based on us analyzing either a code base or an image or a runtime environment. If the SBOM is imported, then you're not modifying the data, you're overlaying it with your interpretation, right? Because we don't want to lose information that either another tool put in or a supplier passed to you. So there would be an overlay of information that is basically on top of the SBOM with both things like vulnerability annotations that we're currently working on, or maybe there's a missing license or you want to add additional information to a particular SBOM part, that will be available as an overlay on top of imported SBOMs. So these are things that are on our roadmap and planned for future releases.
Perfect.
Yeah, and if you have, I'll ask Michael specifically, if you have additional requirements, please reach out to us. We'd love to hear more and make sure that we're accounting for these things in future plans.
I'll actually drop the email into the chat box. And I could relay that over to Alex.
Yep, perfect.
All right, other questions we had. Are there any collaboration features built into the product to support developers, security, or compliance teams working together?
Yes, so I talked about it a little bit. So if you basically look at all the circles on the left and right side of this diagram, so we've got lots of different native integrations to basically developer tools, so CI/CD tools, registries, runtime environments. As I mentioned, we do have lightweight inventory plugins to pop into a runtime environment, assess which containers are running, and pass those image coordinates to the product so those can be scanned. On the output side, we do integrate with defect tracking systems like Jira. We can post messages to collaboration tools, so Teams, Slack, and others, and generate output in various document formats. So yes, lots of different plugins available. I guess the other thing I should mention is this is very much an API-driven product. So everything that you saw in the browser, everything I can do through the interface, you can also do through the API. So there's either the API itself, or we offer Anchor CTL, which is a command line interface as a way to integrate Anchor into CI/CD pipelines and other environments. So if there's a integration we don't support natively, it's fairly trivial to interact with us, get data out, push data in, or build an integration on top of that. I don't know, Brandy, if you have a link, but there's public documentation that lists out all of our integrations on our website.
Okay.
And we can send that out along with the slides.
Okay. There was one more question. I feel like you kind of covered it. What's next for Anchor after the SBOM release? I feel like a couple of Michael's questions alluded to that, but is there anything else you'd like to add on there?
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk about, I guess, the big chunks that we're working on. So one thing that we are currently working on, which we expect to release later this year, is annotating vulnerabilities. So that would be ultimately delivering full VEX support, both input and output. And the idea there is, regardless of what the vulnerability says, it's really up to you to interpret if it impacts you or not. So this will be a longer journey and will actually impact the Anchor scoring that I showed, where your environmental information will actually factor into us determining how important a particular vulnerability is to you, and you having the ability to mark something as doesn't impact you, or maybe it does impact you, and here's our plans to remediate it. So that's one piece. On the SBOM side, definitely developing additional views. So that was asked as far as a graph view, more kind of vulnerability to package to SBOM view. So all of that is in plan, and some of that's actually being worked on today. And then, kind of a continuous thing of just getting better on both, the creation of SBOM, so package discovery, and vulnerability reporting, right? That's kind of a never-ending task. So continuing to get better at both of those.
Yeah.
And if there's anything, you have in mind, any of the attendees, please reach out. There's a marketing email in the chat. Let us know so we can make sure that we consider that for future roadmap.
We've got two more questions that are coming in the Q&A panel. Kim's asking, how does this fit into the shift left big picture CI/CD flow? What is the big picture of the value stream?
Yeah, good question. So one thing that we always pride ourselves on is the fact that we can go from code to cloud, meaning we can start assessing what is coming out of the build in the form of containers before they get deployed. We can further assess pre-production. So if you're deploying to stage or test servers, we can certainly have analysis events there. And then using our runtime plugins to get the inventory or runtime environment, we can assess not only that there's a problem, but where has this container actually been deployed. So looking at kind of those three phases of development, and understanding when a problem was introduced, because again, remember, we're saving the SBOM for each of those scans. So you have an SBOM in development, you got an SBOM in test, and SBOM in production or runtime deployment. So being able to understand, did your SBOM from development to production change? Did any unexpected packages slip in? Maybe there's a vulnerability there. Did any packages get upgraded or downgraded during the process? Shouldn't be happening unless there's another build that maybe you're missing scanning there. And then in case there's any new vulnerabilities coming in, tracing them all the way back to the source repo scans. So that's typically how we do it. And then again, all the circles on the right side is how we would communicate any of those findings to the appropriate people.
Perfect. Michael's asking about pricing, so I just dropped the link in the chat box and in the Q&A. I think we hit all the questions.
Yep, we just have some additional resources available. So let me, I guess, touch on these real quick.
Mhm.
So there's a website link on where you can read more about our Anchor SBOM offering. And if you go up one level, you can get information about the entire product. There's a launch blog that I authored a couple of weeks ago. So that explains in more detail with screenshots all the different capabilities. We've got an ebook if you want more reading around SBOMs. And we did an SBOM sprawl webinar about a month and a half ago. So that gets more into process. So as a webinar we did with a partner that really talks about outside of tooling, like what can you do to not get overwhelmed with multiple SBOMs representing same things? How do you correlate them all? Where do you put them? And how do you make sense of the data? So definitely recommend you watch the recording there if that's an issue that you're facing.
Mm. Very good. Nicely done, Alex. There was a lot of content you covered.
All right, very good. Thank you all. Thanks to the
All right.
attendees.
Yeah, thanks for everyone for joining, and you can watch your email for later today or Monday with additional resources. Thank you.